All right, we've started recording. So once you navigate to your course, you've got your navigation bar up at the top here where you can navigate within the course, and we're going to be focusing on the content tool. So if I click on the content tool within this course, you can see the teacher view of the content tool. So I sort of noted at the beginning that the student view of the content tool is very different than the teacher view. And you can always view as student, as a teacher. If you click up on your name here and click on view as student, you can view what the student sees. But I've got a student logged in another window here, and I'll show you what the student sees as well, just so that you can really get that view from both sides. So when I come to the content tool, and when you first came to the content tool, when you were given your course shell or your course for summer school, you might have noticed that there were some units here, right? There was likely a virtual field trip unit, which is essentially just a folder, and then maybe some of those folders to folder to your third-party content that you're going to be or that you are using in your summer school course. And so you may have already figured out that you can expand and contract these units. You can move them around, but note that changing the order is going to change the order that the students happen upon the content. So I always like to show at the beginning that student view so that you can get a sense of what they see when they log in, and you can see how important it is to be thinking about the order of all of your items within this content tool, because it's essentially your roadmap for the students through your course. So if I pull over this screen here, you can see I'm logged in, I'm in the same course, and now I'm logged in as a student, and I've selected the content tool. And you see this view is very different, right? We don't have those units on the side. The view for teachers is very much all about building and organizing a course, whereas the view for students is very much about consuming the course. And so it's structured very different. And so for the students, what's going to show up in this top area here is the last item that they left off on, and they can hit continue. And you'll notice that these are each of the units, and you can always, students can bounce around for sure within the units as well. And so you see they can click on each one and expand and jump into any of these units as they'd like. But typically what they would be doing is clicking on the last thing that they left off on and using these arrows to navigate through the content. And so you can see here, I can click on this arrow, and that takes me to the very next item that, as the teacher, I put in content. Or like I said, maybe there were some resources already sitting in your environment, like the virtual field trips or the link to your Edmentum content or your Scholastic Lit Camp. But the key takeaway here is that that order defines the order that the student will happen upon the content. And so it's important to think about that student experience and how you want that content presented to them. They do also have the option of expanding the little table of contents here, so they can, like I said, jump around. But most students will experience their course by clicking through content using these arrows. So I'll pull that back over, and we'll go back to the teacher view. And so if you notice, it's all the same units. This one has an eye with a line through it, so it's not visible for by students. So we didn't see that one in the list of blue topics, but everything else was there and visible to the students. All right. So as I mentioned, your course likely came with a virtual field trip unit with a virtual field trip for every day, and then another folder or two with your link to the third-party content. But as I mentioned, most teachers like to personalize or add their own supplementary content, change things around for a way that works for them and their students. And so that's absolutely possible. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So some of the things you can do are pretty intuitive in terms of just dragging and dropping, changing the order of things through drag and drop. So you can drag and drop an entire unit, or you can drag and drop items within a unit. And so you see what I'm doing here. And so First thing I want to talk about is pulling in additional resources. So those resources, a lot of times I've heard teachers in NYC have a lot of files in Google Drive. And so you might have some Google Slides, you might have some Google Docs that you want to bring into your content tool. And there's essentially, I like to see it as two different ways you can do this. And the way you choose to do it is dependent on how you want the information to be presented to students and what you're doing with it. So I want to show you. Let me expand this folder here. So I just created a new unit just by clicking on New Unit and created a unit called Google Files. In the real world or in your courses, you might be putting these individual files kind of peppered in amongst other content. But for demonstration purposes, I just kind of threw all my Google files within one folder here and just called it Google Files. And so you can see what I've done here is I've brought in a Google Doc. This one's a Google Doc. This is a Google slide presentation, and this is an embedded Google slide presentation. I just want to show you the difference between the two. So this one is a Google Doc. You can see it's loaded here. As a teacher, because I have full editing permissions on this item, I can, click and do everything I could do as if I was working right within Google Drive. So the way I brought this, actually before I move to that, I want to talk about what the student sees. So for the student view of this item, if I bring it into content, and I'll show you in a minute how I brought this in, when the student comes to look at their content, look at this individual piece, what they can do with the file is reflective or determined by the permissions that are set on that item. So if it's an anyone can edit, then they'll actually be able to edit that document themselves. And I'm just loading it up on another screen here, and you'll be able to see the student view. So here we go. Pull this over. Now I'm back in the student view, and they're looking at this, this Google Doc that I've added. And now I don't have edit access, so as a student, I'm just looking at it. But if I had changed the sharing permissions on my Google Doc to say anyone can edit, well, then that means that the students could collaborate on it. So the way you bring it in is dependent on what you want to do with it. And like I said, I'm going to show you how I brought this item in. And this might be, if you take a look at this view, students can access things that they can access within Google Drive. They can sign into their Google Drive, which would allow them to make changes to it with having their name attached to it, especially if you of course, if you add those sharing permissions to be able to, anyone can edit. So again, if you want that collaboration, then you can bring in a Google Doc through the Google Drive integration, which I will show you. So right here, what I did to bring this in is I selected the folder that I wanted to bring it in. So Google Files, I want to put it in this folder. And then I click on this Add Existing. And then your first option is Google Drive. So it's very easy. And from there, I'll see all the folders that I have within my Google Drive. And then I can navigate to the folder that, that the item is sitting in and search within that folder. So let's say I'm going to go to my sample docs, and there's all my documents. I can select the document I want to add, and in it goes. Now, that's the first way. If you like or you want this sort of view where students see, they've got options to their toolbar here. If they're logged into Google Drive, they can do things, like make a copy and work with the copy within their drive. This is a great way to pull it in. Now, the other way I want to show you, if I expand this, oops, pull this down. The other way I want to show you is by embedding the Google Doc or the Google Slide presentation. So this second example here, high frequency words, this was brought in the exact same way I just showed you through that Add Existing and then Google Drive, and I pulled it in. And so now you can see as a teacher, I've got full access to all of the toolbar up at the top. And if students had edit access, they could be collaborating collaborating on the document without having to leave the iLearnNYC platform. But the other way that I like to bring it in, which is a little bit more techy, but I'll show you how to do it, is actually embedding the slide document or the Google Doc right into content. So you notice the difference here. This slide deck is embedded right into the content, and now it's like you're in presenter mode for the slide presentation. So you don't have all those menu bars. It's really less of a collaboration kind of approach. It's more like I have a slide deck in Google Slides, and I want students to view the slide deck. I don't need them to collaborate on it and have access to all of those extra kind of toolbars and stuff at the top. And so I want to jump back over to the student view and show you what the difference in what that looks like now for students. And so I'll just pull up on my other screen here. I'll start with the one that I pulled in the first way I showed you. And so right here, this is the first way, right? The way I already showed you, clicking on Add Existing and then Google Drive, and you see the student has access to some of the other tool options. They can navigate through it on the left-hand side here. It's a little bit more, I always like to think of this way as if you're wanting to collaborate on documents. But if I navigate to the next item, which is the embedded, this is a much cleaner view, and this is the view if I think you just want students to see your Google slide presentation and click through it. And so you can see they can do that here. And they can click through it. They don't have to go over to Google Drive. They don't have to be signed in. It's just they can view the item right here. Nice, clean view. You're not expecting them to make any edits to it or collaborate on it. So the way to do this, like I said, is a little bit more techy, but I wanted to show it to you today. So I'll pull this back over. And to do this one, to do it this way, we're going to hop over to my Google Drive. And so here I am in my Google Drive, and you can see I've got my documents here. And so you navigate to the document that you want to embed, and I'm going to choose a different one. I'm going to choose this YKale document. So go into the document, and then you'll go to File. Once we give it a second to load, there we go. And then you'll see an option, Publish to the Web. Okay, so File, Publish to the Web. And right here, you'll see that there's an Embed option. All right, so you've got, by default, you'll be on the Link option. I want you to swap over to the Embed option. And you hit publish, and that will make it viewable by anyone where you embed this. That's why students don't need to be signed in to their Google Drive. And it will give you this this code here. And this code, it's already highlighted, so I'm just going to copy that. So just copy. And then that's the code that you want to bring into content. And so that's the first half of it. Grab that special embed code from Google Drive, and I'm going to hop back over to iLearnNYC. And this time, instead of clicking on Add Existing, and I'm going to click on the folder that I want to put it in. So I want to put it in the Google Files folder. I'm going to click on Create New. And the second option here is HTML document. So what we're doing here is embedding the Google Doc into Brightspace and obviously, or iLearnNYC. And obviously this is all online, right? So it's almost like you're creating a little web page online and you're embedding the content from one web page in the Google slide presentation into another web page. So that's why we're selecting HTML document. That essentially means like a little web page. And so now that we have that open, we're going to use the option Insert Stuff. And that's this button here. It's a little play button. And you see if I hover over it, it says Insert Stuff. I talked last week about some other cool things you can do with Insert Stuff. You might already be familiar with it because that's how you access the Add Video Note tool, which is one of my favorite tools in iLearnNYC. But we're not talking about that today. We're going to scroll right down to the bottom. and we're going to go to enter embed code, right? Because that's what we got from Google Slides was that embed code. So we got to put it in that special spot. So we put enter embed code, and now we paste that code, hit next, insert, and now it's sitting there. We got to give this a title. I think this was called Why Kale, and we'll hit save. Now this guy went kind of small. Let me just check my embed code options. You know what I'll do is I'll jump back over, rather than troubleshoot that one, what will happen is normally it will display the entire document, but I'll do the same thing for this guy just so you can really see how it works. But publish to the web, there's our embed, copy it, and I'll just try it again on this guy. Scroll down to enter embed code and pop it in there. There's a nicer looking preview. And so if you insert that, now it's all ready for you. Hit save. Now, by default, things will be hidden, so don't forget to make it visible to students. And now it's embedded right in the content. So with the first option with the Google Doc, it was a little smaller. There was probably some code in there that talked about the sizing that I might have had to adjust. But just for time purposes, I'm just going to show you this, this Google slide that went in there nicely. And so now what happens is now it's embedded. Anyone can see it in my course. When they happen upon it, it's that nice clean view. So I do really like that embed option. Like I said, if you're just looking to display your PowerPoint to the students, no collaboration effort, you just want them to be able to click through the PowerPoint and you know, take in the information. All right. So the other thing that I want to mention is this embed code. If this is new to you, the embed code of a Google slide is not the only place where you can get the embed code. So there's multiple sites that actually offer the embed code. And things like YouTube, for example, that embed code is always offered on a YouTube video so that you can embed your content tool. You know, things like Twitter, you can embed right in. H5P, I'm trying to think of other websites offhand that I know offer embed code that teachers usually use. Quizlet is another popular one. Padlet is another one. So those are all examples of things where you can get that embed code and use that same workflow where you went to create new, HTML document, insert stuff, and then enter embed code right there. And so if you can get embed code from your resource, then you can, again, embed it right into Brightspace. But if you don't have embed code, it doesn't mean that you can't bring it in. It just means that maybe you have to bring it in as a link instead of an embed code. And so just to pull in another example, I've got YouTube open here. And if I right click on the video, you see there's copy embed code. And I could do that right here. Paste that in. And now my video is embedded right in. And what's neat about this is you actually, because you're creating like a little web page, you actually have a little cursor where you could add additional information underneath this. Watch this video and think about, you know, whatever your instructions are, you've got full editing rights here to add, you know, a title, text above, text below, whatever you'd like to add some items or add some information around your video. I can hit save. And so now you can see that's saved right in. And now for the student, when they were to, if they were to jump into that, let me just make sure it's visible and head to it on the student view, and I'll pull that over so you can see that. There it is. And now you can see the student view. If I pull this over, they've landed on it. They see the video nice and big, and any additional information. If you put a title up at the top, they would see that, or an introductory paragraph or something, a descriptor underneath. That's all visible there. It looks really nice, clean. They don't need to go to YouTube and then get distracted by the watch next or the ads and all of that. They can just stay within the iLearn platform and hopefully are a little less likely to get distracted and go off watching maybe some other videos. All right. I see some other examples of other embed coders. Thank you, Christina. I don't know that resource, but yeah, that's another example in the chat there of a site that offers embed code. So that is, in a nutshell, everything I wanted to show you in regards to bringing in Google files, bringing them in through the add existing versus going to your Google Drive, getting the embed code, and using the insert stuff button to embed the file directly into your content. The next thing I want to talk about is the fact that you can embed, or sorry, I don't want to use the word embed. You can bring in other assessments that you've created within the iLearn platform into your content as sort of a roadmap for your students. So for example, I know some teachers are using within the toolkit, the assignments tool or the quiz tool or the discussions tool to build some supplementary assessments in addition to whatever's offered in Edmentum or the third-party content. And by the way, yes, you can monitor whether students have viewed these videos when they're embedded. That's the benefit of embedding things directly into your content, is always through the class progress tool. You can get statistics on how long they've spent on that page. So again, like I said, some teachers are using assignments. They're creating some additional assignments, which if I go to the assignments tool, you can see that I've created 2 supplemental assignments that I've added to my course. Now for students though, for them to see this assignment, what could they do? Sure, they could go to the toolkit and they could click on assignments and they would see the assignment there, but they would only know it's there if they go looking for it. And so I don't know too many students that go looking for assignments. So the better option is to, after you've created your assignment, is to bring them into your content tool in the place where you want students to fall upon that assignment. So if I go back to the content tool, back to the content tool, you can be placing your assignment, like I said, where you want them to fall upon it. So if we go back to this example folder with all my Google files, maybe I want them to read this Google Doc on what is poetry, or maybe it's a diagnostic intro document where people are all putting their ideas around what is poetry to them. And then I want them to look at this embedded Google slide. Maybe I've got some instructions there about what I want them to be thinking about when they're looking through this Google slide. And then between this embedded Google slide and before they start learning about kale in this example, I want them to submit something. I want them to submit that supplemental assignment 1 that I created. And so I want to put that supplemental assignment 1 right between this embedded Google slide presentation and this why kale. And so what I can do to do that is select the item before you want where you want the item to go. And then click on Add Existing because the assignment already exists. And then you'll see there's this option, Assignment. And so I can click on that. And there's my 2 assignments that we saw sitting in the Assignments tool. And I can bring in Assignment 1. And make sure when you bring it into content, by default, it will not be visible. And so swap that over to visible, and it will place it right at the bottom of the folder. So like I said, I wanted it between this embedded Google slide and YCale. So I'll just grab it and place it right there. And there it is. Now, when the students go to view, go to the content tool to do their work, they will fall upon these items in this exact order as they are moving through the content. And so if we remember from the student view, when they're clicking those next arrows, they'll fall on that Google slide, and then their next item will be supplemental assignment 1, and then they'll be prompted to submit to it, and then they can keep going. They submit to it, and then they keep going and can keep moving through the content. So that is really a key thing I want to pull out, or I want you to take away from the content tool, is that it can really act as your roadmap for the students as they're moving through the course. So they know what order to be doing things in, or rather it's everything is presented to them in the order that they should be doing things in. It just makes it easier for them. I know some teachers will absolutely make an announcement or an activity feed post about what they should be doing that day, and you shouldn't stop doing that. That's excellent, but a good way to make it easy for students to be navigating within content is to put it in the order that you want them to be completing those items. And like I said, you can do that just through that drag and drop, and making sure if you're bringing in extra, if you're creating quizzes, assignments, discussions in the iLearnNYC platform, make sure that you add them to content, which we saw me do, right? We saw that we created the assignment in the assignments tool, and then we brought it into the content tool. But I do want to point out that you don't have to do it in that order. iLearnNYC is super flexible and lets you kind of build the course in the order that makes sense to you. And so for that reason, you'll notice that when I click on Create New, I also have the option of creating an assignment directly in the content tool. And so what it will do is it will still create, it still talks to the assignments tool. It'll still put it in the assignments tool. But if I just call this example assignment, really quick, there's no instructions, no anything, but you can see now it's sitting in content. And if I go over to the assignments tool, we'll see that example assignment sitting there. And there it is, example assignment. So either or, it doesn't matter which way you, which order you do things in. Just the key takeaway is if you built it in assignments, that's not going to put it in the content tool. Don't forget to put it in your roadmap of where you want them to fall upon that assignment, whether it's after specific documents or after they've viewed something, whatever it is, make sure you're putting it in that correct order. Okay. I did mention in the description, I talked about Khan Academy, so I just want to address that because I'm realizing I didn't mention that. That's another example of just an external document that you could, or external website that you could be bringing in. If Khan Academy offers embed code, I'd of course recommend bringing it in that way. But as I mentioned earlier, if you have a site that doesn't offer embed code or you can't find it, a great secondary option is to just copy the link. So you grab a link to the item, and so I'll copy it, and then use the link option to add it into your content. So I'll go back to content. And I'll go to supplemental activities, we'll say. Create new, and then web link. And then here I can paste that item, and then save it and display it right there. And so this actually, because of the type of link it was, it allowed me to embed the item right into the content, which is great. That means that they don't need to link out and go to the Khan Academy website. It's brought right in. And so that's an advantage, obviously, with Khan Academy, is it does allow you to embed it right in, which saves the students having to go out to it. And so that's another option for bringing items in. Okay, I think I've essentially covered everything I've wanted to cover. The chat's been going off like crazy, but I can see Winnie and Celine have been working hard to answer questions in the chat. And I essentially want to move over to open Q&A. And so like I said, we're going to prioritize questions that relate to the content that I've been talking about today. And if we get to the other ones, then that's great. So just give me a second to scan through, or if Winnie, Celine, if you guys have any ones that you want to jump in about, please feel free.
I think just that we're going